then we'll be caught up with everything, right? I guess so. Just waiting for this to kick in a little bit, and then we'll get underway. All right, folks. So I am Steven Sersky, and this here is my Delta course overview. I guess some of the reviews, some of the things that I'm working on here with the Delta, and one of I have recently. We are on week 8 right now, but I'm going to review Unit 7 today in this video, and then that way we can take a look at some of the things that have been going on leading up to this point of the course. Unit 8, I think I have to have the assignments in by, well, I do them Monday mornings here, Beijing time, and I think they're technically due on Sunday night, British time, Greenwich time, yeah, sorry, GMT. London time, there we go. But anyway, I wanted to take a look at it because, and I know last Unit 6 was very lengthy. It was a very long episode, about 1 hour in duration, because Unit 6 was actually a very long unit. Unit 7 is a little bit shorter, so I'll pop you over to this shot over here, the screen over here. So into Unit 7, there were only 3 chapters total, 4 chapters total if you include the exam focus, this was a lot easier to get done in terms of workload compared to Unit 6. I think, yeah, so there was 3 or 4, maybe 3 tutor tasks total. Yeah, I've done that, great. For this chapter, or for this unit. Let's just check that. Tutor task, no. So grammar didn't have one. Did testing have one? Testing had one. I'm pretty sure. Testing, tutor task. So there's one. And then we had a Lexis 1, 2. And then the exam focus was the third task, or a third tutor task, instructor task that we had to turn in, that we got feedback on. Sadly, I didn't really have a chance to take a look at the feedback yet. It's been kind of busy for the last little while. I did that review on Wednesday, the hour-long review. So that was a good review for myself, and that's why I also wanted to take a look at what's going on in Unit 7 for this video to catch everybody up, and then that way I can go on to Unit 8 and focus on that. All right, so getting into it, again, we're back to grammar, favorite part of the Delta. Not at all, because this is what is, as I mentioned with Unit 6, this is probably one of the bigger focuses of, bigger focal points of the exam. Grammar and phonology seem to be the 2 big ones. And then with that, grammar, phonology, and then terminology. So in general, terminology, being able to speak like an academic ESL instructor, basically. That's your goal by the end of this course, is to be rifling off all those terms that you'll never use in class, but that if there is a common sort of language that ESL or English language educators use, that's what this course is teaching you. So taking a look at Grammar 6, this is focused on chapters 24, 25, and 26 in Martin Parrott's Grammar for English Language Teachers. I don't think I did that. What I did do, though, however, I did do the whole unit. So as I mentioned last time, the unit draws from this book heavily, basically, not word for word, but content for content. It's all pretty similar to that. This unit, this chapter, for the key terminology consisted of these ones over here. So a complex sentence. So it's like a complex sentence would consist of like a main clause and a subordinate clause, which are the next 2 parts here. So the main clause, a main clause would be something that can stand on its own, whereas a subordinate clause is something that can't stand on its own. I think those usually can begin with like that or which or such as. Like it'd be sort of like a set off by commas. A defining clause, I forget what that is. I gotta check that. Defining clause and a non-defining clause. Okay, so a non-defining clause would be something that uses like who or the one, that. Defining clause would refer to someone or something in the sentence prior. So it would refer to something that's already been disclosed within the sentence itself, whereas the non-defining clause, it could be anybody. It's a bit more general. Finite adverbial clause, nope, gonna have to look that one up again. Noun clause, so it's a standalone sentence constituent that deals with, that has a noun as its focus. A relative clause, that I think are those of that, which, who, like all your relative pronouns and things like that. Non-finite clause, okay, it's not finite. So if there's a finite adverbial clause, then this is a non-finite clause. Good question. I'd have to look up that one as well. And then a conjunction, which a lot of times with the conjunctions, what happens is that they actually mark off the two clauses or the two parts of the sentence. So if you have a main clause and a subordinate clause, because, since, and there's another one I think that aren't actually classifiable in terms of main clause or subordinate clause. So they actually stand on their own. But double check that. In Martin Parrott's book, he does go through that a little bit, how conjunctions sort of mark off or demarcate the ending or the beginning, usually the ending of a clause and then the beginning of the next one. So that's what they're trying to do here, is a paper 1, tasks 1 and 2, task 4, and then paper 2, task 2, in which we analyze course book extract in terms of language teaching, learning aims, and discussing language focus of specific exercises. So this would be sort of like your grammar targets of whether or not the whatever book you're using, does it actually deal with the grammar focus that it says it's going to. All right, so moving on through chapter 6 here in this unit. Let's see if it loads up here. So introduction, different types of subordinate clauses, finite adverbial clause, goodness, noun clauses, relative clauses, and then that's it. Complex sentence. Okay, so what is a main clause? Main clause, so clause in general, is a set of constituents which usually includes at least a subject and a verb phrase, often an object or complement of some kind. For a clause to be a main clause, it has to be a group of words that can stand on its own, right? So there you go. And it gives a couple of examples here. The cat scuttled out. We left the house at 9. Prices have risen drastically this year. What did you do? What did you do? It's wrong. It corrects it down here. And then number 5 is I don't care. So subordinate clause is a clause, subject plus verb phrase, such like an object or a complement, which can be attached in some way to the main clause. So it can't stand on its own. It requires the main clause to exist. So here they said, matching these ones, the first 5 sentences to the next 5 here. So number 1 was the cat scuttled out. Here they go, as soon as I walked into the room, the cat scuttled out. So this as a subordinate clause, as soon as I walked into the room, if you just stop the sentence there, people would kind of go, and what? Then what happened? Well, that's when the cat scuttled out, or the dog scuttled out, or the cat quickly scuttled out, or the cat screeched and clawed my eyes out, something like that, right? So that's where a subordinate clause, it can't stand on its own. Likewise, number 2 here, it says we left the house at 9. For number 7 here, we left the house at 9, comma, which gave us plenty of time to reach London. So if we just had this part, subordinate clause, which gave us plenty of time to reach London, people are like, what? Which gave you plenty of time to get to London? Wow. So you got to have a main clause before that, and so on and so on. Notice that the subordinate clauses, unlike the main clause, cannot stand alone. Right, so we just talked about that. Different types of subordinate clauses. So, yeah, oh my goodness. Yeah, so here they go. They give you more clause types to go through. Finite adverbial, noun clause, relative, non-finite, defining, and non-defining clause as well. All right, let's just skip to the answers and see what the hell they're talking about here. So number 1, we left the house at 9, which gave us plenty of time to reach London. Non-defining clause, because it doesn't... good question, why? We left the house at 9, which gave us plenty of time to reach London. It doesn't really mention who, other than we and us. It doesn't define exactly when they got there either. I think that it leaves plenty of time as sort of an open amount of time or duration for the event to happen. Noun clause number 2. The evening news understands that ministers have agreed to. Okay, right. Have agreed to raise the study's funding allocation. Noun clause. All right, sure. Relative clause. All right. Well, there you go. You have to take a look at this. I'm not going to go through them all here. And then here it actually gives some sort of caveat emptores, caveat emperors, caveat emptor. Because sometimes you can actually classify the same sentence as one or two different things. So here, number 3 is a defining clause. It's both relative and defining. So taking a look at number 3 here. The election in Afghanistan has turned into a disaster for all who promoted it. Relative clause. So they're saying it also could be defining clause. For all who. So for everybody who, for those who, it can be defining because this who is referring to something that's happened earlier in the sentence. Number 4 and number 7 as relative clauses also be right. So defining clause, non-defining clause could also be a relative clause. That's the girl I told you about standing over there. Interesting. I told you about. So it's like an elided. It's an ellipsis. It's dropping some of the information, so you don't exactly know who is being referred to, but it's someone. This part I told you about standing over there has to refer to something earlier. So it's a subordinate clause. And it needs to refer to something because it cannot stand on its own. Who did you tell me about was standing over there? Oh, the girl. Okay. So that's where sort of it's a relative clause in that sense. I told you about standing over there. What did you tell me? Well, the girl. Right. That girl. That's one over there. And then also number 7 can also be relative apparently. So show me the dress you bought. You bought what? Well, you bought a dress. So there would be sort of maybe extra information over here, which would be you bought a dress. So it's a relative clause. I guess the dress which you bought, I guess, something like that. Double check that what the relative clauses is. I don't want to mislead you. As you can see, I can sort of this 2 weeks ago, but they can both be a defining clause and a relative clause. So you do have some wiggle room, but for the exam, you have to be able to justify why you have identified that sentence as the one that you're saying it is, whether it's defining or relative. You just have to be able to back that up. Right-o? Number 1, non-defining clause, which gave us plenty of time. All right, sure. Okay, so here it is. The point is that the defining, non-defining distinction can, as Parrott points out, apply to a wide variety of clause types. Important to bear in mind that clause can belong to more than one category at the same time. Right. So moving on to a finite adverbial clause. That's a quiz. Forget it. Not going on with that. So noun clauses, okay, so this basically is a noun clause is any sort of noun that has extra features sort of appended to it. So it talks about the subject auxiliary inversion rule. I'm not sure what you mean. Right, okay, good. What you're saying is ridiculous, same problem. So this deals with some of the issues that learners might have. Some languages would not front a clause complement what you're saying. Right. But you use it as an it is adjective plus WH word sort of construction. It is ridiculous what you're saying. Yeah. If someone ever said that, that'd be very awkward. You'd be like, why don't you just say what you're saying is utter ridiculous, which is how you would say it in English. All right, so noun clauses. So yeah, he got the job that he was after drops the that. There you go. See, right there. Reduced. He was after, which is a reduced version of the second embedded noun clause referring back to the job that he was after. So underlined phrase is actually made up of two clauses. He got the job, which is a noun clause, and he was after, which is a reduced version of a second embedded noun clause. Yes, lots of stuff you got to figure out for this. So there you go. So noun clauses, finite adverbial clauses, noun clauses, relative clauses, going on to like that which, whom, or who. Whom is the more formal way of saying it. Who would be much more colloquial and modern, I would say. I do not teach anybody to say whom. And if some student asks, why isn't it whom? I go, because it's not. We've grown out of that stuffy British method of formal speak. Let's just say that. But that's not exactly 100% true. There are some, like, I guess for whom it would be more of no idea. I would just teach who. I don't. You can use whom or who, but they are not interchangeable. You have to use whom in certain constituents. So to whom, for whom, it has to be in that. But it can't be the one who. The one whom, that would be awkward. The one who would be a little bit, I think, more natural. Overall, I just encourage people to use who, W-H-O, as opposed to putting an M onto the end of that all. So, right, here we go. Suggested answers for this part. Task 2. What was this task 2? So you had to take a look at the textbook extract, which was from where? Okay, so this is this one. I think, is this the one dealing with killers? Psychology at work. Yeah, so it's someone who committed a crime. Very happy topic to teach in class. How not to get caught, right? I mean, that's, oh, how very awkward. So part of the work here dealing with this is dealing with, this is paper 2, task 2, I think it is, wherein you have to basically rip apart whatever textbook page that they give you, activity, extract that they give you, and you find pros and cons for it, advantages, disadvantages for it typically. But so that's just one page of a textbook that they would give you, and you have to go through it. The one thing that I've noticed for myself, and that we've been instructed to be very careful that we are not doing, is when we are analyzing this, do not just go through the step-by-step procedures of what they're asking you to do. You actually have to figure out what the questions here. What do the authors mean by reduced relative clauses? They're shortened. Purpose of exercises 5A, 5B. So for that, 5A, 5B, this one and this one, don't just repeat what it's asking them to do. You have to understand and write about the aim, so the purpose. Why did the teacher or the material developer or the company that was creating this, the educator who wanted to communicate this knowledge, use 5A and 5B rather than something else? It deals with aims. So let's put it this way. If you had to break this down to do an outline, a very basic outline of what you were going to create as something for class, you'd have point 1. So we'd have an introductory, we'd have some ice breaking, we'd have number 2, activate user schemata. Number 3 would be skimming or scanning for specific information. Number 4, to get the students to become familiar with the text. Number 4 would be scanning, dealing with looking at the text a little bit more. And then number 5 would be developing a better understanding of grammar points that are used on, and then focusing in on specific types of grammar that are used, and then possibly going into number 6, which would deal with practicing using it. So number 6 and number 7, they're getting into actually productive exercises already. So that would be part of the aims of this text right here in that order. And then number 8, 9, 10, number 8, so you're proofreading, so checking, you're verifying that people have understood the form and the usage of the verbs that appear in that paragraph. And then speaking would be fluency exercise, and same with writing. That would probably be giving a teacher a break to go check his email or something like that. Kidding. It would be more about killing the last 15 minutes of time, or for homework, or giving students a practice. So they've done speaking fluency, then they can do writing fluency as well. So that's what you have to be aware of when you are ripping apart these extracts, these text extracts, is to make sure that you're actually dealing with something. You're talking about the aims, the purpose, not what they are doing, not the procedures. And I know I've done it too, and I've noticed one of the things that when you're familiarizing yourself with the procedures, it's one of these things that you almost have to go through it, and then tell yourself what the procedures are, but then understand why they're doing it, which you have to do very quickly in the exam because it's timed. Concluding comments. So what would they? So there you go. Concluding comments about clauses and stuff like that. Here are the references that they use for that. But again, grammar for English teachers would be your big one. All right, moving on to testing the 4 skills. I think this is the second and the last one for testing. Again, looking at chapters 9 to 11 of Hughes. I can't remember the first name. Testing for language teachers. So this is, again, a lot of stuff that you probably kind of already are familiar with if you've done any testing or any teaching, or even like if you ever developed an exam for a university course, or even a semester final, term final. You're probably aware of the concepts, but can you talk like one of them? that would be the big thing. So this one, I guess, deals with testing writing abilities, what sort of what tasks you could use, like what would be a valid writing sample, testing writing and nothing else. Okay, what is this? I've forgotten. So testing what? Ensure validity is to restrict ourselves to testing the skill that needs to be tested. Try the task below. Why would the next item possibly not succeed in eliciting a valid sample of writing? Make notes. Oh, okay, so they give you this example. Imagine you're a mechanical engineer. Already going, no, I can't. I failed math, so I can't. Thank you for insulting my intelligence. What they're saying here is that this is a very specific question, that this would almost be like if you were applying for an engineering position, then you could use, like, and you're like actually face to face with the boss, or with the HR, not the HR, the boss, the guy who's going to do the hiring, the girl that's going to do the hiring. That's when you might see this question. But if it's a general application, this type of question would be far too specific, far too detailed in its request for information, that it would be useless because most students wouldn't be like, well, I've never thought about being a mechanical engineer. I don't read newspaper advertisements. I don't want to work in the Middle East. I don't have any preference. I'm just definitely not there. Getting a job, any job would be great. Refers to the advertisement. So it's a lot of information to take on. So this is an invalid test. It's not the best one that you could get done. Right. Too long, too complicated. Intended to assess writing, not reading skills. Too much information needs to be retained and synthesized, taken in to produce an answer. So way too much information. People might get sort of concerned. They'd get nervous and blocked up, I guess. And as a result, you wouldn't get an official, a good representation of what they're actually able to do. So that's an invalid type of question to use. Holistic versus analytic scoring, making sure that things are you doing the whole thing, which is holistic, or focusing in on certain points throughout, right? What is this? You probably suggested that holistic scoring focuses on the text as a whole, grading on the overall impression. Analytic would be various sub-skills, such as grammatical accuracy, coherence of argument, and task achievement. So like your TOEFL and your IELTS tests are very analytic and sort of it's analytic, but leads up to an overall band score, I believe, right? Suggested answers. Right, so holistic scoring, there you go. Quick economic focuses on the text as a communicative whole. Disadvantages may cause a score to neglect certain subskills, such as accuracy related subskills. So they're not focusing in on their grammar or their proper sentence construction or even spelling. Holistic would take everything into account, whereas analytic scoring would take in spelling, grammar, coherence, like matching. Do you use transition sentences? Do you use cohesive devices and stuff like that in your construction of the paragraphs or your essay? Testing speaking skills. Yeah, so this is another one that kind of goes on for a while. Kind of hard to teach speaking skills other than just get people working in pairs and getting them talking, giving them a topic, and just let them speak. And then, but a lot of your students still want to speak with you. They don't want to speak with the kid who can't really speak English beside them, right? So the idea here is to be able to give them enough tasks and enough material to work with that it can be graded, and that the stronger learners and the lower level learners can sort of meet halfway. One can move up and one can learn more about the language by teaching it to someone else, because let's not forget that does happen where you are teaching the language to another person, you are also developing an understanding of that same language. So it's another, there you go, right. And the idea being that when you're doing speaking in a classroom or as a test, that you're able to create a test that is accurate. And it doesn't just, let's put it this way, if the examiner or a teacher is always finishing the sentences or filling in the blanks or always talking over the student or the candidate, it's not a fair assessment of the candidates, the clients, the students' speaking abilities. So you have to develop what they call interview techniques. So this is some of the things that they suggest. Questions and requests for information. So pictures, role play. So if the mechanical engineer, talking about bridges, talking about tall towers. Prepared monologue. Okay, that's like IELTS Part 2, where they have to yammer on for 2 minutes about some topic. And then reading aloud, which is not always the best thing to do because it slows you down quite a bit. You can use that for pronunciation, but it wouldn't be a fair assessment of someone's speaking abilities because they are given the text and they're depending on it. And plus you speak differently when you are reading something rather than if you are generating that stuff from your brain itself. Using questions, okay, so right, and so this one they go on about what kind of questions are actually a good thing to use and which ones aren't as well. Basically, one of the things that you want to aim for with speaking exercises is to be able to give them enough of a general playground that they can exercise their language abilities. You don't want to, this is here right here, follow up why. You ever want to keep a conversation going? Just ask why. Just keep on asking why. Between native speakers, that'd be terrible. At the bar, terrible. In class, why? What do you mean? Well, could you give an example? Why? And so on and so on. That would be one way to keep people going. There's a point, though, that you kind of hit a wall of enthusiasm to respond to why, especially if it sounds like you're not actually listening. So you do actually have to listen for these ones as well. Interaction between candidates. Okay, so making sure that you're able to pair them up properly, that you're able to sort of pair the stronger students with stronger students, and then if they have to mix abilities or mixed levels, then they're able to still sort of learn something as well. All right, the tutor task, what was this? Oh, so we have to evaluate this one here. following conversation. So there's 3 parts dealing with effectiveness for this K lady or K man, K person, who is taking a course, and they want to improve their speaking skills for everyday interactions and transactions in general. So we'd have to take a look at these 3 parts. Is this appropriate for what K needs, or can there be something better? This one I said was actually decent, because with these she practices the inversions. Do you know Brian? You do know Brian. That's 2 different ways of saying the same. You do know Brian. We have a different connotation, a different meaning than do you know Brian? Brianne, sorry, not Brian, Brianne. But then also here, being able to change the form of the given verb in both situations, and then carrying on throughout the whole paragraph, changing the forms and like adding ing or adding an auxiliary if they needed to, an S if it's third person. So he live or he lives in Frankfurt, right? So that is something that you do need to work on as well. This one wasn't as useful, but it's a good generic practice. A, and, the, or nothing into each gap. All that is making them focus in on the definite or indefinite articles, the articles that pop up in English that sometimes are neglected by learners, and then that way, it's as for her direct request for speaking abilities and everyday transactions, she does not need to know about these articles, because in communicative language, articles kind of play a very secondary role. If it's writing and an email, you have to be a little bit more careful, but most speaking exercises are more concerned about fluency rather than accuracy there. And then speak to your teacher for 1 minute about a film. Again, partial validity only because when is she ever going to have 1 minute to talk about a film? Usually it's going to be a back and forth. Oh, did you see that film? Yeah, I saw it. It was pretty good. I liked what they did. If they kept on going on more than a sentence or 2, you'd be like, all right, I didn't really want a review of the film. I just kind of was wondering if it was any good. In a spoken conversation, that analysis and description of the movie would take place over 5 or 6 or 10 sentences rather than a person just going on for a minute about the movie. This goes into discourse analysis as well, but that's sort of what they're saying here, or asking you to analyze. Receptive skills. So you're listening and you're reading, dealing with this. So again, reading skills, being able to make sure that they can skim, scan, develop these sub-skills of skimming and scanning, quickly reading a passage, and then developing intensive and extensive reading capabilities as well. Choosing appropriate texts, making sure that the text is actually useful to them, and might be interesting. Not necessarily that they just absolutely love the topic, but that if they're doing an IELTS course, it's about an IELTS topic, not something completely unrelated. Or if they're doing TOEFL, or if they're doing university essays and stuff like that, making sure that they're able to stay within the genre that they are requesting. So business people might not want to read fiction, romance novels. Might not. Appropriate text. So for business English or business corporate sort of stuff, you'd pick more suitable materials that's something that they could actually connect with rather than be completely disconnected from. Using appropriate test techniques, multiple choice, true, false, short answer, gap filling, information transfer. So that's reading something then putting into a different form on another page. Again, going through questions, using questions, righto. Wow. So yeah, so it breaks it down into the different what elicit short answers and stuff like that. Testing listening skills. Yeah, I told you about that book, Hughes, I think it was, where Penny Ear, and she just basically ripped apart every listening ability, every listening exercise you've ever done. It's all terrible, it's horrible. So you have to do it again. You have to make it more appropriate, more natural, better suited for your students. Conduct your needs analysis. And then, yeah, so different test techniques, note taking, partial dictation. That was always good to get students to listen carefully. Usually, you'd have to read it twice, 2 or 3 times. Um, if I read it, it was easier. If I had a tape, it was harder because then you have to press pause. And if you didn't press pause, you press stop, and you have to find that area again. So it was always just easier just to read things instead of having a audio, pre-recorded audio. Concluding comments going into the recommended reading here. Testing for teachers. Yeah, so this book, I think it's 11 chapters total. You just basically have to read the whole thing. Lexis, take a look at this. I still haven't read Lewis. Actually, this is terrible. I haven't read it. I haven't read this one either. Lexical phrases. This is something I do have to do. Lexical approach by Michael. That's not Michael. Oh goodness. Anyway, chapters 4, 5, and 6 of that. So you're basically reading the whole thing. This chapter deals with, you might not know these terms, but this is what the Delta wants to teach you. Polywords, lexical frames, prefabricated utterances, idiomatic items. Now, let's take a look at what a polyword is. Polyword, bus stop, look out, put up with, the day before yesterday, stand up, sit down, come to the board, together, everyone together. So these are all, so you wouldn't think of them that way, but that's what they're talking about, is that they are, polywords is a term coined, describes some detail by Lewis. Okay, so right out. Messiest category, encompasses all sorts of defining factor. Single semantic units. That is, they can't be analyzed as the sum of their individual constituents, their individual parts, and cannot be broken apart. And they give you an example here. Lexical frames, also these like pausing. Lexical frames. So this is more like it's up to you. It's kind of like these no-brainer answers, the stuff that we don't really think about, like a, what do you call it? An automatic response, something like that. You learn how to sort of automatically respond. It's up to you. It's your turn. So it doesn't actually have. It would be very difficult to break them down into each individual. It is your turn. Of course, it can be grammatically, but in terms of developing Lexis, you wouldn't teach it is your turn as separate individual units. You would teach the whole phrase as one. It's up to you. It's your turn. It's all your fault. I can't stand jogging. So these are lexical chunks that you're teaching, and that with this you'd probably also teach a little bit about connective speech, or connected speech, which is big in the phonology of this test as well. Multi-word items. What is this one? Excuse me, please. I'd like to begin by welcoming you all. So, right, and this just asks you which one is which, elementary, intermediate, or advanced. Let's take a look at the answers here. I know I'm going quickly, but this, again, excuse me, please. So this is something very basic that you teach begin in class. I'd like to begin by welcoming you all, intermediate. So I'd like to begin wouldn't be a beginner, but certainly intermediate, they would know I would like to begin by welcome. I would like to begin welcoming you all. So you can also elide that as well. Where's an advanced example? Number here. How dare you say that? How dare you speak to me like that? So this gets into like intonation as well, much more emotional. It seems structurally simple, but expresses an emotional reaction. So there's already more intent, more of a message conveyed behind the words themselves, rather than just the grammatical constituent parts of it. Again, you wouldn't teach each part, how dare you say that to me, like that. You would teach it all as one chunk, probably in a role play situation. Or customer service, please don't talk to me that way, sir. You know, if they're giving you a bunch of F sharps or SH deuces and bombs and stuff like that, right? I wonder if you could. This is a very polite way of, a very formal way of asking for something. Easier would be, could you please? That would be a bit more, yeah, probably elementary. Could you, do you think you could? That might be elementary already. If they understand the concept of like it being a polite request. Prefabricated utterances, and then dealing with Yeah, so this, it's going to rain, it's going to be sunny. Does it give... All right. These might be defined as stretches of some spoken language or written sentences which do not necessarily need to be taken apart and analyzed before and after they are used. All right, so again, these are have several lines of generous. Okay. These can be retrieved from memory as ready-made chunks. So very similar to multi-word items as a sort of automatic response. They're institutionalized, so they're used frequently enough that you don't really need to define what they are. And they sound like real English. Matter of fact, this is one of these things where if you ever learn another language and you learn this sort of prefabricated utterance, like 谢谢, 不客气, in Chinese or Привет, in English, in Ukrainian, or any other sort of formalities that you would learn in another language, people might think, oh, your language skills are pretty good. And you're going, I know 6 words. That's it. And they all deal with this, basically. So, but that's what prefabricated utterances are. You don't really have to understand them too much. Like, these wouldn't be prefabricated. Parts of them could be. Do you think, blah, 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 are going to lose? Yeah. What do you think would be prefabricated? But this would be, it's going to rain, it's going to be sunny. It's all very repetitive. And you could teach, it's going to be, blah, blah, blah. It's going to be, blah, blah, and then drill that several times. That would be your prefabricated sentence. Moving on to the task. What was this? Oh, yeah. So we have to go through these and then deal with, identify which part was which level would it be most suited to, and what sort of context would you teach these in. So that's probably some elementary schools, maybe some fluency exercises, some accuracy exercises as well. I went fishing, I went to the cinema, so dealing with what did you do this past weekend. Childhood as well, past memories, good question. Idiomaticity, dealing with idiomatic blah blah blahs. So Lewis suggests the most effective way to understand idiomatic language is to think of a spectrum of idiomaticity. Literal, transparent, comprehensible as the sum of its part, and the other language metaphorical, opaque, and not related. So that's where being idiomatic sort of falls in between. So it's raining pennies from heaven. So that's a very idiomatic phrase, very opaque, because what do you mean it's raining pennies from heaven? No, it's not. Prices fell sharply, so that'd be another idiom. Can a price fall sharply? I'm keeping a low profile. Something like that. So being able to teach sort of the use of these things as well. So being able to spoken language, just be more spoken language rather than written language. Because if you try to written language needs to be a little bit more careful, because you can get past a misplaced spoken idiomatic phrase than you could in a written situation, because written would come down to whether or not it grammatically fits into whatever they're trying to do. Whole idiomatic utterances. May I just say something? Excuse me for interrupting, but do you really believe that? So again, this seems like it's like prefabricated utterances or multi-word items. Again, they're whole chunks of words, of sentences, but you can teach that all as one chunk. You don't have to teach each individual word in that sentence, or even like that it's a question. May I just say something? You can say it as a statement too. Why not? Some people do. Concluding comments. And so the essential reading would be, what is this? Again, going into, so this is Thornbury, favorite guy. Thornbury about language. Got to start reading that a little bit more closely as well. But Lewis is the one they sort of refer to quite a bit in their Lexis analysis. Okay, let's take a look at the exam focus here. Paper 2, task 1. So this is probably is this the extract? Marking scheme. Longer written response dealing with What? Good question. All right, so whether or not it's appropriate for your learner. Identify the relevance to the learner and any testing terminology used. So this is from the 2000 IELTS examination papers from 2007. And you can find this one actually in the Delta Module 1 June 2010 exam. These are available for download on the Cambridge English website. So here, gives you a perfect structure to follow. Don't mess with the structure, just use the structure. I did copy this, paste into a Word document, open Office, keep that template there, look at the assignment, and then go through it piece by piece, change the words that you need to change the terminology you need to change, but do not mess with the template they've given you. It is a good template. It is what they're looking for. If you go to the exam, these examination papers and the suggested answers, it's the same format. So that's the format you want to use for it when you're breaking down paper to task 1. So positive, you break it into tasks or data, then make another subtitle, a subheading, then another subheading as well. So that is what you want to be able to do, keeping everything nice and tidy in terms of its presentation. Which one do we have to do? Right, so we had to do this one about dealing with Mary Bennett. Oh, Mary Bennett is applying for the job, but our learner is going to a Frankfurt exhibition soon. So they have to learn how to write memos, and then they have to respond to someone asking for a job. So here's the whole rubric here. M is a manager in a tourist hotel with customers mainly from the UK. And you have to read these very carefully because this question will give you all the information about whether or not this is relevant or that is relevant to what they actually need and what type of exercises or vocabulary they should be working on in an effort to actually do well in this test and to elicit a good language sample from this portion. All right, so I know, again, that was a little bit long, but I hope you guys got a bit of a overview of Unit 7 here for the Delta. Again, I mean, this is week 7. I'm on week 8 right now, so I'll review week 8 in a little bit later. But it's if you're going on, if you're struggling through it, I understand. I think last week I didn't get as much reading done. I didn't get any reading done, to tell you the truth. I can't even lie about it. Other than creating these 2 videos, Unit 6 and Unit 7, this has been my review for, and I'm sure you can tell, for the Delta so far. But this weekend, certainly getting in on the action as well, and preparing Unit 8, which is going to be submitted on Monday morning. All right, so if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please do let me know in the comments below. I'd be happy to yick the yak with you about pros and cons of the Delta. I know I've received quite a bit of information from other people who have taken the course before. If you do Google search for how to pass Delta Module 1, there's a couple of websites that come up, and there's 2 ladies who post, at least one lady who posted some very good resources, and then there was another, I think maybe it was a guy, I can't remember, but 2 very good websites pop up, and I'm pretty sure they're going to pop up for you. Lots of downloads there as well. If you don't know, if you can't find it, try first, please. But if you can't find it, let me know, and I can direct you to the necessary websites. All right, so with that, I'll let you go. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it, and we will do this again.